Well, it's nice to see everyone. Hope everyone's having a great conference so far. I'm with Skyflow. My name is Bjorn Ovick. I head up our Fintech and payments business. I've been here at Skyflow about 4 years. This is actually our fourth Fintech DevCon, so it's a great conference. We're a developer, an engineering product, Skyflow. We provide a data privacy vault, so it's always nice to come to these. It's a breath of fresh air to talk, interact, and mingle, and share best practices. So we're super excited to be here. What I'm gonna do today is talk about what's happening in the Gen AI LLM space, and specifically around privacy with it. My background is in fintech and payments. Started out at Wells Fargo back in the late 90s when e-commerce was just taking off, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But I've been in this for a while and have seen a lot of different transformations, and we're on to something new here. One thing, guys, I gotta stay in between these pink lines, so I can't wander too much, but I like to do that. Well, let's dig in. So, unless you've been under the rock for the last 18 months, LLM is the new thing. So it's one of those things, my uncle recently visited. I live in San Francisco, and he lives up in Southern Oregon. And I picked him up from the airport. He flew in from Crescent City on a little puddle jumper airport. And he's 82, 83 years old. And he said, Bjorn, what's this LLM thing? Do I need to be worried about my kids and my grandkids taking their jobs? So if he knows about it and he lives up in rural Southern Oregon, it's out there. People are talking about it. People know about it. In my opinion, there's a lot of hype about it. It's not going to steal everyone's job. It's hard to tell what's real and what's not real today with it. But there is a lot of promise around it. And what people aren't talking about today, and people are starting to talk about today, and what is real, is the privacy concerns about all of our customers and their data as you start looking at LLMs and Gen AI. And we're gonna talk about that today and different approaches to address that. With that, what does this mean for our industry? And it is transformative, and I want to go back a little bit and talk about other transformations that have happened in technology that have also happened in financial services. If you look back to the 70s, it was the mainframe era. Mainframes were coming in, computing was starting to happen, and all of those things. It was a big transformation for financial services when that occurred. Then the desktop era in the 80s, the 90s, the internet, mobile, and so on. And what it is really is, how did these transform the market? And we'll talk about that a little bit, because I think it's super relevant of where we're at with the LLM space to start. And then we'll dig into privacy of LLMs, and I'll give you guys a quick demo of an approach of what we do. So in the 90s was the internet era. This quote is great. This was what we heard a lot about it. What's it say? We were promised instant shopping. None of that's gonna happen. Why is it that the local store is still selling more in e-commerce volume than what's happening on the e-commerce? This is a big hogwash. Maybe people will browse, maybe people will look at features and those things. We know whoever said this quote is absolutely wrong. Again, I was coming out of college during this era, and it was super exciting because e-commerce was here. I was able to communicate with people around the world. It really transformed the way that we do things, and it was the foundation for everything we're doing today. At Wells Fargo, we actually conducted the first e-commerce transaction ever at an offsite in Monterey, California, and it took off from there. So again, one of the things that, just going back in time, this transformed the industry, and I truly believe this is what's going to be happening with LLMs today. Back in the 90s, we had no idea what the internet would look like today, right? But we knew something was happening and something was coming. The next is around the mobile era. Everyone in this room, I guarantee, has bought something using your phone. Book an Uber ride, book your airplane tickets, check into your flight, all of those things. Check your bank account balance, send somebody money. All of those things happen via the mobile device. And what happened here, again, another big transformation with the smartphones coming out. in the 2000s. I actually was fortunate enough to co-found a startup outside of financial services, and what we did is we built a two-sided marketplace for retail staffing. And if you look at people that work in retail, they're young college kids, maybe high school kids, everything was mobile first. And we built a mobile first application to deal with that. And it was successful from that perspective. So again, embracing these new technologies and rolling those out is very powerful at the time. And if you look at it, mobile first companies during this time crushed it. And they embraced the mobile first technology and took off. Again, dating myself, there was MySpace, and now there's Facebook and Instagram and so on. But Facebook embraced in mobile, Instagram or MySpace didn't, and they're by the wayside today. So again, another thing is embracing these new technologies, seeing the big things that are coming and so on. The next era was the cloud era, and we all know about this. Again, mainframes, big banks, everything sitting, still today a lot of them, sitting there. The cloud's coming, and again, the thing about the cloud environment, we all know this, is it's scalable both vertically and horizontally. Where if I want to do that internally, it's very expensive to do, hard to manage, and so on. And again, another big transformation around the cloud era, and again, it's important to understand the history here behind all these things to see what's happening in the LLM space. At Wells Fargo, we built one of the best payment networks in the world at the time, in the 2000s. PayPal ran on top of us, eBay ran on top of us, and so on. It was all built on a mainframe. Wells Fargo didn't keep up with the cloud era, and Stripe came out and has taken off and done those things. Others have done that too with vertically integrated SaaS applications or payment things. But again, embracing the cloud era has enabled these new companies to build fast. Old companies like Wells haven't embraced that to keep up, and look what's happened to them. Looking at JP Morgan now, this was 2017. They're set to run their first applications in the public cloud. That's a big statement. Largest bank in the world, 2017 doing this. That's a huge transformation of what's happening. If you talk to a banker there or the risk team there 10 years before that, absolutely not. Black box, black cross, you can't do that. Never thought this would have happened a few years ago, but it is happening now, which is exciting to see. At each era, we see these companies recognize these new innovations coming out. And some of them embrace it, and some of them don't. And what we're all here to do today is to continue to embrace these new technologies. And LLM, in my opinion, and a lot of people's opinion, is that next era. If the old guard doesn't embrace these things, they're not going to be able to catch up. Looking back again, you have Amazon, Kmart, wasn't able to compete. Walmart has. They've been able to embrace the new technologies and continue doing that. MySpace and Facebook, same example we talked about earlier. The nice thing though is companies are embracing this and trying to dabble in it and figure out where it's going to go. So with the era we're entering now, I truly believe that we are entering the next technology transformation with LLM era in the Gen AI era. And hopefully everyone here else believes that too. One of the big transformations that's normalized a lot of this is ChatGPT has put it in everyone's hand. It's a free service, it's normalized it. My dad, my great uncle have actually used ChatGPT and have been exposed to it. It's been a great service to the space and the power of it. They're using it for things that maybe you can't do a search on, a Google search on. Different elements there, but it's exposing people to the technology and making us all comfortable with it today. And there are different applications starting to pop up. So Cohere, is a Gen AI platform to help you write better tweets, better titles for this presentation, as you can see there. So there's applications coming out that are specific to certain functions. And what it's doing is it's not changing or taking away my job. It's changing the way that I actually work, and I can use these tools to be more creative. Copilot, you guys have seen this, right? Again, it's not replacing engineers. It's changing the way that engineers work. Instead of writing code, we're now editing code and going in and tweaking it and enhancing it and those things. So again, the transformation's happening, but it's just improving the way that we go about doing work today and driving things forward. Clearly in the short term, it is impacting the way that we do things. And this will continue to happen and go forward, which is really, really good for all of us. It's a big market. You know, this study says it's $477 billion by 2027. I think this may be an underestimation, but it's a big market in front of us, and we've all seen these studies in numbers out there. ChatGPT, insane scale. We all talk about a hockey stick. This was a rocket ship. You know, went 5 days, 1 million users. I think, what did it take them, 3 weeks to get to 100 million? Or maybe two months? It was insane growth. So again, this should wake us all up that something is happening here, which is exciting. And again, it's also giving these tools to the masses and getting everyone comfortable with this technology. The old guard's starting to come in. How many of you guys remember Watson on Jeopardy, right? Going out and doing that, which was pretty cool. But now we have the old guards, the OG of neural networks and doing that. Now they're rebranding themselves as powered by a Watson X. So it's good to see old guards starting to embrace this as well. You know, there are other things. You know, Notion's doing the same thing. Every B2B SaaS company you see out there, you look at their homepage, there's something on AI on it. You look at large public companies' prospectus when they do their investor calls and those things. There's AI in there of how they're all embracing it, which is exciting to see. And with these shifts happening, you got to move or you're going to be left behind. And truly believe that. We need to embrace that. You know, say it with the internet, the mobile, the cloud era. It's all happened. The history lessons there. And I thought it'd be interesting for us to start there to really talk about these fundamental shifts and staying on top of it. So hopefully that was helpful for you guys. The good news, though, with the LLM space is we're all starting from the same spot. There's no mass infrastructure that others have built, you know, big, large technology companies have built that gives them a first mover advantage or barriers to entry. The barriers to entry for this are low, which is exciting, and it gives everyone the opportunity to embrace this and move quickly around it and behind it. So we're not going to be left behind because of barriers to entry. We'll be left behind because we don't embrace it going forward. And looking at this, you know, the technology works today. You know, the neural networks are in place and there's happening. But there's a very, very major problem with this, and this is what we're going to talk about today, is around privacy. A neural network doesn't have a delete button. So again, it's not a traditional table. You can't go in there and say, delete my social security number. I'm your customer. I have the right to be forgotten, depending on where you live and the different privacy regulations. How do you handle that today with a neural network, with an LLM and those things? And that is a huge problem that we're seeing out there today. A lot of large financial institutions, a lot of startups that are trying to bring this out to market have this issue around privacy. And it's a big problem that we're seeing out there today, and we need to be able to remove this barrier for us to continue driving the innovation. There's been big reactions behind this. You know, Italy just said, all right, guys, time out. We're stopping ChatGPT in our country because of this, because of privacy concerns. ChatGPT obviously got together with the government and figured something out, and I think they're live back today, but it was a good 3 months where it was shut down there. And rightfully so. We should all be concerned about this, and it's a blessing, you know, that the government came in and saw that. As an industry, we shouldn't have the government coming in. We should be able to self-regulate and do the right thing for our customers, which is exciting, or the right thing to do. You know, people are doing Band-Aids to the problem. You know, I think early on, did everyone see that Samsung headline with somebody dropped in a bunch of their code into ChatGPT and exposed it, private code? Did everyone see that or hear about that? So what big companies have done is they're like, let's shut it off. You know, coming out of our network at a big bank or whatever it may, Goldman Sachs, you just can't access it. Again, that's a Band-Aid. People will still figure out how to use it and go around it, which isn't going to help. So now what I want to talk about is the convergence, from an AI architecture to some of the architecture we're seeing happening in the privacy space. There's a bunch of different data at the top coming down. This is your LLM flow. You're coming down from vector databases, data pipelines, and so on with data to put into the models and to train the models. You're sending through this, through some type of orchestration layer, and then it gets down to the LLM. But what about privacy here? What data is coming down? How are you filtering what's coming down from the vector database, the data pipeline, landing in the model to make sure that you're not breaching the trust that your customers have in you as you expose that data? This is the architecture, but that's the big problem with it that we see today. Salesforce has taken an approach to this with their, what do they call it? Their secure data retrieval through Einstein. It's their trust layer, which is great. And what they're doing is really isolating sensitive data that should not be going out to the LLMs in this case. The challenge with this is it's just the data I have in Salesforce. It doesn't encompass everything, but it's a great start. It's great to see somebody like Salesforce, an industry leader out there, taking this approach and treating privacy as a core pillar for a responsible Gen AI strategy. So we're excited to see things like this. But again, it's a challenge because it's just that small subset of my data. Maybe a big subset, it's a lot of customer data, but it's not everything there. Major cloud companies are promoting, their version of this, and it's basically, hey, we're going to give you a four-walled garden, tongue twister there, to put your data in. Won't be exposed to anyone else. Everything's there. But does that solve the problem? Who still has access to my customer's data that shouldn't have it? Does my customer service rep that's using an LLM to service a customer, they don't need access to all my customer data? Yes, it's in my four-walled garden, which is a good start, but everyone still has access to it in the company. Google's doing this, Amazon's doing this, Azure's doing this, and so on. So you can see the different architectures here. The other thing this is doing is it's expensive, right? If you're going to run it in their service, it's good for them because you're paying them more to run these applications and so on. And that's the problem with this model. It is a good start, it isolates it, but again, people still have access to it, which is a challenge. Fundamentally, it does not give you privacy. And around that, the fine-grained access controls. It still doesn't give your customers control over their own data, right? Depending on what country you're in, California, for example, you have the right to be forgotten as a customer. How do you remove my social security number, my name, or whatever it may be from an LLM, even if it's in the four-walled garden? You can't do it, and that's the challenge there. We need to make sure that we still can use these models, giving access to the data of what, where, and for how long, to give access both to service the customer to make that experience better, but also protect the customer as a core pillar of privacy. And not all data is the same, and this is really an interesting approach here, and there's some big movements that have happened in the last couple of years. We've built out KMSs for encryption keys. We've built out secret managers for secrets and so on. But there's nothing today for sensitive PII data, and this is the emergence of the PII vault. And a new architecture that's come out. IEEE last year published this study or this article about the new architecture of the future to really treat sensitive data differently and isolating it in what's called a data privacy vault and pushing that out as a popular architecture to really isolate that, similar to keeping secrets in your secrets manager and so on. We should be putting PII data and treating it the same there instead of having it sprawled across the organization, including in LLMs today. So now, a PII vault is the de facto to protecting and storing PII data as we move forward as an industry, which is exciting. Google started this, built this themselves. Apple has done this same architecture. Netflix has done the same architecture and taken this very serious and just giving the right access to the right data at the right time. So now that we talked about the history, we've talked about this emergence of how to treat PII data and protecting it responsibly, how did this all merge together from an LLM perspective? And what this is an architecture of fine-grained access controls when you're looking at LLM data, where you have data coming in, and you have access controls, lands in the privacy vault, and then you have different views into that vault to find social security numbers, or if you don't need the social, it's masked and redacted in doing that. So again, a best practice from a centralized PII vault architecture to do that. Moving along, we can apply these learnings and best practices of what the industry leaders are doing with sensitive data now in the Gen AI world. And that's what we're excited about today. So what does this mean? So we all know that you need to train a model with data. And there's multiple ways and multiple data sources that you can capture that data from to train the foundational model from that. You know, sensitive data and non-sensitive data lives in multiple areas of multiple organizations in different ways. This comes through and goes through the data privacy vault, and this is, again, an architecture that we're promoting out there in one way to approach it. And out of the data privacy vault, going through and de-identifying any sensitive data that lives there and replacing it with a token. And now when it goes into the vault itself for the training environment, I've now removed first name, last name, email address, social security number, credit card numbers, whatever it may be, and replaced it with a deterministic token. And what that does is it still gives me context of that data element, but it's not actually the data element itself. So now when a customer comes to me and says, hey, can you forget me? We can remove their sensitive PII information from the data vault, and everything else in my architecture, infrastructure, in my LLM is a token that's meaningless to everyone. So that's number one, a new way to approach this, and giving everyone the assurance that sensitive data now is not in my LLM. So that's step one to this. The next thing is now when I run a prompt. You know, now I'm gonna prompt the model. And I'm gonna give a demo of this in a little bit. But again, multiple ways to interact with these models and so on. And you know, I'm gonna go and you know, put in some information here, you know, John Anderson, those things. And you'll see it's de-identified into tokens right there. And again, this is on the prompting of it. And now when it goes into the model itself, the tokens are there. And again, if there's relevancy to those tokens, I already have that in there from a training perspective, so I can match those. But I didn't put any sensitive data in the model by running this detect capability to intercept and interfere any sensitive data before it drops in. Does that make sense? Yep, cool. And then on the response back, re-identifying it, so rehydrating the first name, the last name, and so on. So a very simple example of this running through. And again, this is what we're promoting and talking about out there to really help us move LLMs forward and take the compliance, the privacy questions out of the picture from this, so we can continue to move it forward. So let's see this in action. What I've done is we created, you guys know the basics. You have your foundation model, your fine tuning, and your interference of what we're gonna show today. So what we did is we put together a demo here, a chatbot, a financial advisor chatbot. So big bank, wanna create this chatbot and go out there. So it's an AI-based assistant customers can use to receive tailored recommendations on financial products in the so on there. We're gonna show some privacy-safe interference. So all PII in this demo will be identified before it goes into the LLM for interference, and sensitive data will be re-identified on the rendering back. The other thing we're gonna do is add some fine-grained access controls to there. So again, a banker maybe shouldn't see my social security number. But I need to prompt it because that's the key identifier. So we'll show how we can run interference there depending on who the user is or who's prompting it and their role in the organization. And we built this demo using React front end, Python for the back end. OpenAI is the foundational model behind it. And then we're using Skyflow's detect API and vaulting capability. So does that make sense? Okay. And we've had tons of conversations with banks, and they're like, gosh, we want to do this, but our privacy team, our compliance team saying, no, what about our customer data? And this is an approach to help overcome that. All right, so let me exit out here and let's see, go over. All right. So again, the first thing I'm gonna do is my compliance team told me that we can't give product recommendations on investments, but we can do it on opening a CD. So the first thing I'm gonna show you is how to run guardrails on this. So with this, you can put in different types of guardrail information around that. And here, go down, and is there any specific type of investment options you're looking for? What stock should I buy? And again, we've set up a guardrail that I can't give stock buying information. So let's go ahead and see that happen. So guardrail detection, again, all this just happened in real time. Stock advice rule triggered, so you can't do that. The LLM responds back, sorry, due to company policy, I can't do that, but would you like information about opening a CD and so on? Yes, I want to do that. Obviously, we need to do some type of verification before it goes in of that customer. And what this does is it also, using these new technologies, I can give custom recommendations based on maybe your deposits, your history, and all those things. And that's really the power here, to put that customized, bespoke view of the type of CDs they should open. But in order to do that, to pull their information to put in the model, I need to verify them first. So let's go ahead and do that. And now what it's doing is reaching out to verify that user and so on. And what's happened is we hit a RAG, and we took their banking and account information in. And prior to sending it off to the model, what we did is we actually used our detect APIs and tokenized name, location, bank account numbers, and so on. The LLM does not need that information to turn around its recommendation, right? But what they do need is bank account balances, lowest balance, highest balance, and so on. We formatted this differently so it's easier to read. Obviously, it's a string when it goes in, as you guys know. And then some of the conditions that we pulled in as well from the RAG around what they qualify for and so on. And then that went into the LLM for them to process it and come back with the recommendation. Does that make sense to everyone, what we've done? Okay, cool. So let's go ahead and review the response here. Very simply, based on the account history, we recommend a CD with a 5.4% interest rate, yada, 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 yada. But again, this is a very powerful calculation that just happened using this model behind it, which is what we're able to do now with these things. Simple explanation of it. But if you look at the response here, again, it came back here on the response side, name given one, again, we tokenized that above when it went in. But then we rehydrated it, and we're able to put that in for John looking to invest in a minimum of 12 months. So what we just showed you guys is a couple things. One was guardrails, so making sure that we're not abusing or we're able to control what is actually we're prompting the models to do. Not give stock advice, but just give advice around CDs. Again, making my compliance team happy. The second thing we've done is we've removed all of the sensitive data, the PII data, to identify John King specifically. But we've been able to also keep intact bank balances, lowest balances, and all those things for that individual, but it's anonymized because we don't know that it's for John himself with that account number. But then on the response back, we're able to rehydrate that in there and put back in John's name to make it very personal and have that type of interaction so he feels like I'm actually talking to an advisor and so on.
Yeah, it's
That's a good question. So the question here was around qualification for the different products and so on. And your example is somebody lives in California, but they don't qualify for this type of CD because they're a resident of California. In those cases, yes, you are correct. And a lot of that would happen, I believe one way you could do it is insert that with the RAG implementation of the criteria from the RAG before it goes into the model of qualifications there. In that case, you would need to know that they're in California or not. So yeah. And again, those are the nitty-gritties depending on the interaction. What we're really trying to do here is show how to run interference, how to protect and keep the sensitive data out. Each company needs to work with their privacy team, their security team, their regulatory teams on what's acceptable and not acceptable to put in. The beauty of it, though, is it's very flexible and you can do those different things. Yeah, good question. Any other questions? Okay, cool. All right, so that was the first demo there that I just wanted to show quickly. The second thing I want to talk about now is we just had this great interaction with our platform, our chatbot. I want to get this off to my bankers, so now they know that these people are interacting, and we can do a follow-up call from a sales perspective, a banker perspective around that. With that, though, the bankers can't see all the information about that individual. My compliance, my regulatory, my security teams, my privacy teams want to make sure that my customer's privacy stays intact even when a banker sees it. And that's what we're going to show here. So this is a banker application, an agent, where they can come in and give me a list of our top 5 customers or who most likely to buy our CD product, including their phone numbers. List should be based on engagement data that we've tracked for any users that browsed our product catalog but didn't buy anything. So we just had this interaction, I think, with John, right? But we can't give all of John's information back to the bankers because he doesn't have the right to see all of that. Sure thing. Let me get you that list now, prompt it. And again, this is going into the bank's LLM. Looking at this data, looking at those interactions that just happened. And it came back here with this response coming back. So account number, account holder, phone number, and so on. Obviously, these are tokenized values because it's not living in the LLM, which is important. So let's see the response here coming back. So what we've done here is based on a data governance policy that I've set up for this banker, for this user, for this role, I can dictate now what information they see. And this is an example where we were comfortable giving my banker the first name, last name, and their phone number, but not the account number for that individual. So what we've done here is redacted part of that or masked part of that, but given them the last 4 digits of that. So again, this is important as well from an access control perspective to my customer's data. So when my internal employees or my employees are using these chatbots to do these types of things, you also need to make sure they're not accessing everything about that user, only the relevant information for that user here. And that's what we just demonstrated in this case. And obviously there's a bunch of different applications for this. Any questions on this? Yes?
So imagine if the info was a free-form text, and then you're trying to identify PII, and then converting those PII information into those tokens, right? How do you identify from a free-form text PII information in the first place?
Yeah, so there's a whole bunch of different services out there, and they're being called detect capabilities, so detect services. So it's a lot about detecting sensitive data and then tokenizing it or masking it before it goes into the model. Yeah, there's a lot of those out there today that do that. The approach that we've taken is we set up different entities. I think we have 54 of them. And then we can keep adding entities behind that to identify those different data elements. Yeah, so there's a couple of different approaches that happen today. One is there's a lot of detect capabilities that will just mask it, send it in, and come back and reinsert it. There are other services that will actually tokenize using a deterministic token. And that's one approach that we've taken at Skyflow is we can store that so you have repeatability and context around that token next time you see it or when you train it. That's one approach to do it. So yeah.
This table itself is not coming from LLM, right? The table on the right side
Yes.
is coming from some data, right? Now, so what did you send it to LLM, and then how did you rearrange it to this table?
Yeah, so in this example, what we've done is we've sent it off to the LLM. The LLM had a lot of this data in there, but it was tokenized, right? And when it came back with that deterministic token, we're able to rehydrate it because to the previous question, we knew who that interaction was from and so on, and then rehydrate it in. In addition to that, in this case, we also ran a data governance policy behind it, making sure that the banker had access to this data. In this case, they didn't have access to the account number based on that policy, and we just showed the last four of it. Yeah.
Is that policy being set from the Skyflow ecosystem or some third party?
Yeah, so in this case, not getting into a Skyflow picture, I just wanted to demonstrate, something. In this instance, the customer sets this policy up as part of the data governance platform inside of Skyflow. So Skyflow is a technology platform that will enforce it. We don't create the policies ourselves. We give the tools to create them and then enforce them, but the compliance and security teams will create those policies. Yeah, does that make sense? Okay, cool.
And it seems like with deterministic tokens, it's just like obfuscating personal data, and like it still seems to be sent to the LLM. That's how it makes correlations. But to me, it just seems like it's obfuscating the data. Most of it is just not sending it.
Yeah. I mean, there's two ways, like first name, last name, right? You can just put those in there. If you have John, you can't create a deterministic token. Where the deterministic tokens come in important is when it's like an account number or a email or social or something like that, where you can do more of a one-to-one matching. Yeah. Do you have a question back there? Okay, great. Good. Yeah, it's a good question. Again, this is a demonstration of a simple approach to it. You are right, though. Like a account balance, you need to put in there, but you can't tie that account balance to John King, for example. So when you put that in there, is John King really relevant to run that analysis? Maybe not. Is the account number relevant to run that analysis? Maybe not. Depends on what data you're using to train it that you may want to match to it. In that example. But there are use cases like you just said of big deal, we'll just take John King out and then rehydrate on the way back in the response, and that's absolutely a way to do it. But you do lose the context in that case for the LLM of that data. But again, John may not have any relevancy anyways, and there's no context to it for the LLM to actually respond. Yeah. Any other questions? Have you guys seen this approach before? Okay, good. Do you guys think this is a good approach as we start embracing LLMs? Okay, I'm seeing some nods, yes. Okay. Make sure I'm not out in left field. I played baseball growing up, so I use baseball analogies sometimes. Yeah.
You pass on the PII, like context with the PII, and then you just omit the PII at the end, right? Based on who sent the request, right? Why
Yeah, the big challenge there, depending on where you live in the world, there's GDPR, for example, in Europe, or DPDP in India. California has California CPRA. I forget what it stands for. In those laws, customers have the right to be forgotten. And what that means is I can go to my bank and say, hey, I want you to delete all my information, right? Yes, GDPR, for example, you still have to keep it for 7 years, but that's a different discussion. In that case, if it's in the LLM, how do you delete it? And that's the big challenge around that, is once it's in there, it's a neural network. It's not a traditional database where you go into, this field and hit delete and remove it. So that's the challenge around building it in your own four walls, which is an approach a lot of people are promoting. But it doesn't get to the root cause of having control of that customer's privacy. The other piece of that too is how do you control who can access that data? When ChatGPT first came out, how many people were trying to see what data you can get out of the model? People were prompt engineering, give me social security numbers. And guess what was returned? Social security numbers. So again, what would stop an internal employee having that type of access to that data internally without governance and fundamentally just not putting that data in there the first time? Yeah. Does that make sense? I see you nodding your head, yes. Okay, cool. Any other questions? I think we're almost at time here. Great. Let me go back. So, the punchline, never send PII data to the model because the model never forgets. So I appreciate you guys' time today. Hopefully I shared something, made us all think about it. Talked about the revolution of LLMs, talked about how to treat it and innovate on top of it while protecting our customers' privacy, which is the most important thing. Another question. It's a good question. We were just talking about that too. It will impact it. It'll make it faster, it'll make it quicker and all those things. I think the bigger question is what are we gonna do from a encryption standpoint when quantum's there? We're looking at, we're working on it. I used to work at Visa 10 years ago. I ran innovation for their global processing group. We're talking about it then because we knew it was coming and preparing for it. You can say it's still several years away. It could be here tomorrow. We just don't know, and we need to be prepared for it. So, yeah, but it will impact it is the question. How? We don't know. Yeah, at least I don't. Yeah, cool. So if you guys haven't seen this, I think it was on your chair, come over. We're having a reception tonight at $7,000 as well. It'd be great to have everyone there, continue the conversation and mingle, and have conversations about what we're all working on and those things. So appreciate your guys' time today.